my heavenly Father also do unto you, if your hearts forgive not every one his brother their trespasses. You know what? Because it pleases God so, we ought to jump at the chance to forgive somebody of any offense that's taken place in our life. We ought to jump at the chance. It's a great opportunity to pleasure God. Wow. Listen, on the surface it sounds arbitrary, but it's really not the case. God will not forgive the unforgiving because he cannot. When God forgives, he takes us into his friendship, and we see others through his eyes. How can he give us a heart of love by hanging on to our old hates? How can we enter into a fellowship with God and with hate in our hearts? How can that be? You can't pray for somebody with hate in your heart. You can't do that. We cannot be in a right relationship with God and have aught against our brother. I'll say that a different way. There is no way that you and God can have a proper relationship apart from a proper relationship with each other. It's the same thing. We ought to forgive others for our sake, for the sake of others. But also forgiveness is the door by which we can enter into the fellowship with God and be on the same page as him. See? How can we forgive then? There was a woman, somebody said, there was a woman who was offended in the church, and she said, if a right relationship with God depends on my forgiveness, then that leaves me out. That leaves me out. I cannot forgive from the heart. This man offended me and injured me. See? Would you sacrifice your fellowship with God over forgiving another brother, over something when you mouth it out, when you actually say the words, it almost seems silly. You know, the thing that offends you. It almost seems silly. You know, they didn't say hi to me when I came to church tonight, you know. A fellow told me last night, and, you know, it's an anonymous thing. Nobody knows. He said, you know, he says, I built something, he said, and I had an improper motive about that. And he said, he was so angry at it, he says, I just felt like quitting this organization that he was at, just quitting, you know. In other words, instead of forgiving a slight, giving up everything that he put together, you know. Boy, how destructive that is. You know, a man that some guys could sympathize with this woman maybe. Hey, listen, if you knew the guy, you know, maybe you'd feel the same way she was. It's a difficult thing to forgive. And humanly speaking, forgiveness is impossible. We can't do it on our own. We need the Lord. It is his power, his authority, his leading, and by his Spirit that we can only forgive. See, we can't do it of ourselves. There's 4 suggestions on how to proceed in a practical way. One thing is to help we remember that while hate hurts others, it strikes a deadly blow to the one who's hating, the person that can't forgive. It strikes a deadly blow to that person. Another thing is, we find it easier to forgive if we compel ourselves to act consistently toward our enemies as though they were our friends. That's hard to do, isn't it? You can't do that without the Lord. Another thing is, we find it easier to forgive when we remember how greatly we were forgiven. You know what? I really solemnly believe that I think the Lord only had to go halfway for some of us, okay? Really, only halfway. We weren't really the enemies of God, okay? I always kind of, you know, thought there was a God out there somewhere, you know, and, you know, I wasn't really as bad as Hitler or Mao Zedong, you know. I'm not as bad as those guys. They're, you know, I mean, they were deep sin, okay? There was a creditor in a story that goes wrong. He said he owed the king 10,000 talents. He says the account equal to the national debt in a great sum. In the time of Jesus, this was an impossible sum, and the total taxes of 5 provinces, he says, I'm told, equal to 800 talents. A man possessed with 10,000 talents could have hired 10 million soldiers. Now, had he been available to fight for him a whole year? This man here, his debt was so enormous, it would be absolutely impossible for him to pay it back. Now, the king, not willing to lose the entire sum, he ordered the debtor to be sold. Now, together with his wife and children, that he might recoup at least some of the money that was due him. But in desperation, the poor fellow threw himself at the Lord's feet and he prayed. He says, have patience with me and I'll pay thee all. And of course, the king knew that he could never pay that money back. So he forgave him, not in hope of gain, but out of sheer pity for him and his family. So, the once desperate man here, he comes out to the king's presence with a new hope in his heart. He was able to get by. Life for him, through his forgiveness, had taken on a new direction. This is in the text. But soon something took place that plunged this forgiving man into utter blackout in this way. He has not gone far from forgiveness when in bitterness he had a fellow servant by the neck and in bitterness yelling, "Pay me the $17 that you owe me." See, the $17. Now the poor fellow, he flew himself on his face and he prayed. He says, "Have patience with me and I will pay thee all." Now that debt could have been paid. The other debt was impossible, okay? But this debt here could have been paid off. And it's exactly the same prayer that he prayed himself only just a few moments ago. So there's a difference. This man had paid his debt. It was possible to repay. The debt was not beyond his reach. Here, actually, he had this man put into prison. And soon his heartless conduct spread abroad, and it was told to his fellow servants, then to the king. The king said, "I forgave thee all thy debt," okay, "because thou desirest, and should you not have forgiven your fellow servant, he was delivered to the tormentor." And the point being here is, we've been forgiven so much that we should make it possible to forgive others. But why doesn't that happen? Why doesn't that happen? Why aren't we able to forgive, knowing how much we have been forgiven of? See, why is that? There's a disconnect there. There's something wrong there. See, if we're to forgive, we have to have the help of God. The Lord doesn't expect us to do this on our own. But the first thing he asks is that we be willing. We have to be willing to do it. If we're to forgive, we have to have the help of God. The man of the world can imitate Christian virtues. They can be clean and generous and courageous. But to love one's enemies, to possess always toward folks a forgiving spirit, boy, I tell you what, that's something that can't be imitated. It can't be imitated. Well, we reach that high goal only when we give God a chance to help us. There's a story here. I found this in a book. It says there's a story of a British soldier is related by a man named Francis C. Stifles. He said this young officer in the British Army, a captain, was writing to a mother in Germany. The letter wrote something like this. This fellow here actually took her son's life in the war, is the basis for the story. He says, "My dear madam, in the course of commando raid on the French village, it became necessary my duty to kill your son. I am a Christian. I earnestly write to ask for your forgiveness. I hope after the war is over that I might see you and talk to you face to face." The lady writes back. Months later, upping the officer he received the answer. He says, "My dear captain, I find it in my heart to forgive you, even you who killed my son, for I too am a Christian. If you're living after the war, I hope you'll come to Germany to visit me, that you may take some place in my home, if only for a time, a place where my son whom you had killed had sat." You know, the thing of it is only God can work a miracle like that. Forgiveness. And it's the only way to work the miracle of forgiveness in our daily lives, when it comes to offense, when it comes to injury, when it comes to all of these things. You know, Harvey and I were talking the other day about lending family money. You ever get into that? Lending family money. Oh, it's a bad thing, okay? The best thing to do is just make it a gift, okay? Just make it a gift. And that way nobody gets aggravated about it, you know. I remember a guy in a church when I was a youth pastor up in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. He went to the bank and he co-signed for me a dump truck. And I used that dump truck the whole time I went to school. I used to pick up scrap metal and things like that. And, you know, that's the way I worked my way through school, being a junkster, okay? And you know, the thing of it is I paid 2 years on that truck, but for some reason the last year, I never finished paying for that truck. Now, everything's all gone. The guy's gone, truck's gone, everything's gone. There's no way actually reliving that thing is to go back and pay that thing back. There's no way. to pay back that debt. But I'm going to tell you something. He never held that against me. You'd have never known that I owed him any money ever. He never brought it up. He never said a word. And I guess at the time it kind of made it easier for me not to pay the debt that I owed, you know. And you know, the thing of it is that forgiveness really hit home for me, you know. It really hit home. You know, there are certain things that have happened in my life, you know. I've had some things stolen from me here or there, you know. And you know, I think about it now, and no matter what it's been, we had motorcycles stolen. We had a beautiful trailer stolen one time and some different things. And I thought, you know, the Lord can replace that. And I forgave those folks the minute I saw that stuff gone. I forgave them immediately, you know. I was down in a, and a lot of it has to do with that testimony of that man with me, you know. I was down in Miami one day, and we went into a shopping center, and when we came out, there was a guy up in the back of my truck with his hands on my generator, just about to lift it over the tailgate, you know. So I came running across the parking lot, and I said to the fellow, "What are you doing? What are you doing with my generator, you know?" He said, and I'm a sucker for this stuff, you know. He says, "Oh, I was just getting up here to get the model number on it because it looks so much like mine, you know." Really? I says, "It was just about on the top of the tailgate coming off the other side." "Yeah," he says, "I had to look at the underside here, so I had to get it up, you know, like this right here, you know." Well, my son Butch come running over, and he says, "He's stealing that thing." He said, "Really? Do you think he is?" He's stealing it. I says, "Well, call the police." Well, anyway, Butch has got him by the arm, you know, and this guy's like twice his size, but he ain't moving, you know, he's staying there, you know. And he's got him by the arm, and he's not letting him go. Well, anyway, he come on, he says, "You know, Mom, I got a wife and kids, and, you know, I've got this problem and that problem." And it went a little while, and I says, "Oh, Butch, let him go." I said, that's fine, just let him go. By that time, the police pulled in around the corner, you know. And then, of course, you know, then the deed was done. Well, anyway, the car that he had was filled with tools that he had stolen, you know, all across town, you know. But, you know, when I saw that guy doing, you know, after the generator there, I was thinking to myself, boy, the things that I have done, and I never got caught. I never got caught. Stupid things. I tell you what, I was so willing to forgive that guy. Just put the generator back and go your way. Now, it wouldn't have helped anybody else that he stole from, okay? But I mean, I just had that feeling, you know. And when it comes to our salvation and it comes to our relationships, we just don't realize how bad we were. We just don't realize that. I mean, we were fruitless and useless, lives darkened in sin. And yet he takes us into full fellowship and confidence, you know. It's only by the grace of God and his mercy that I can even be here tonight. And it's the same with every one of us. Now, why can't we forgive each other whatever goes on in our life? I tell you what, if that woman can forgive that man for taking her son's life, certainly we can certainly forgive the little offenses that come our way. How about you tonight? Do you have a forgiving spirit? Do you realize what it takes to forgive? Can't do it yourself. It'll take God's power. It'll take his power to be able to accomplish such a thing. Let's bow for prayer together. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the